The box slipped from my hands because I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about how Vanessa looked in that sundress, the way the afternoon light caught her hair as she walked to the bathroom, and I wasn't thinking about the weight shifting in my grip. The cardboard split at the corner where the tape had already started to peel, and everything inside went cascading across her bedroom floor. "Damn it," I muttered, dropping to my knees. Books, old photographs and envelopes, a jewelry box that thankfully stayed closed. And then my hand found something heavy, bound in white leather with silver embossing. A wedding album. I should have just put it back. That's what a normal person would do, right? Vanessa told me she'd been divorced for 5 years. These were probably just old memories she hadn't gotten around to throwing away. But something made me open it anyway. Call it intuition. Call it the part of my brain that never quite believed I'd gotten this lucky, finding a woman like her, 8 months after I'd finally decided to stop being a ghost, haunting my own house. The photos hit me like a punch to the chest. Vanessa in white, radiant, younger, but not that much younger. A groom I'd never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, military straight posture even in a tuxedo. They were cutting a cake. They were dancing. They were kissing under an archway of flowers while people I didn't recognize threw rice. The date printed on the inside cover, June 14th, 3 years ago. 3 years, not 5. And the man in these photos wasn't someone from her past. The way she looked at him. I recognized that look. I'd seen it directed at me. I flipped through more pages, my hands trembling. A honeymoon in what looked like Hawaii. Vanessa in a bikini on a beach, the groom carrying her into the surf. Holiday photos with his family. A picture of them at what appeared to be a military ball, him in dress whites, her in a floor-length red gown looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. This wasn't ancient history. This was her life, her current, ongoing, very much present life. My hands were shaking when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But the screen was facing me, and the notification lit up before I could look away. "Flight lands at 6. Can't wait to see you. Love you." Gee, I checked my watch. 4:47 p.m. The bathroom door opened, and Vanessa walked out still adjusting her earring. "Sorry, I couldn't find my—" She stopped. Saw me on my knees with the album open in my hands. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might pass out. "Daniel," she said. "Just my name." Like that explained everything. "Who is G?" She didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again. "Vanessa, who is G?" She started crying then, which should have made me feel something. For 3 years, I'd watched my wife Rebecca waste away in a hospital bed, fighting a battle she couldn't win, and I'd have given anything to see her cry like that, to see her feel anything at all in those last weeks when the morphine made her a stranger. But watching Vanessa's tears fall, all I felt was ice spreading through my chest. "His name is Graham," she finally said. He's my husband." "Your husband." "I was going to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how to—" "Your husband," I said again, like the words didn't make sense. "You told me you were divorced 5 years ago. Amicable, you said. You said he moved to California." "I know what I said." "Then what the hell is this?" I held up the album. "What the hell is G?" The whole story came out in pieces, each one worse than the last. Graham was a naval officer, Lieutenant Commander Graham Hoffman, decorated, respected, currently deployed overseas for the past 6 months. He thought Vanessa spent every other weekend visiting her sick mother in Vermont. "Your mother," I said slowly. "The one in the nursing home. The one you visit twice a month." Vanessa's face crumpled. "She's dead, Daniel. She died 4 years ago." I stared at her. 4 years. I know how this sounds. You told me you brought her flowers last weekend. You said she recognized you for the first time in months. You said you sat with her and watched her favorite movie. You told me stories, Vanessa. Details. You described the nursing home. You showed me the gifts you bought her. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. I needed the time. The weekends. You needed to maintain your cover. That's not... Your real name isn't even Palmer, is it? Her silence was all the answer I needed. I stood up. My knees popped. I'm 44, and my body reminds me of that fact constantly these days, and I walked past her toward the bedroom door. Daniel, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I grabbed my jacket from the chair. Your husband's flight lands in an hour. You should probably start driving. Daniel. I turned to look at her one last time. She was still standing there in that sundress, tears streaming down her face, the wedding album open on the floor at her feet. She looked beautiful. She looked devastated. And for just a second, some stupid part of me wanted to believe it was real. But I'd seen the way she looked in those photos with Graham. I'd seen how happy she'd seemed. How in love. And I realized I'd seen that exact same look directed at me, dozens of times over the past 8 months. She was a performer, a chameleon. She showed you exactly what you wanted to see. Have a nice life, I said. I made it to my car before the shaking got so bad I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I sat there in her parking lot for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, watching my knuckles turn white. A woman walked by with a German shepherd and gave me a concerned look. I probably looked like I was having a heart attack. Maybe I was. Eventually, I managed to start the engine. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember pulling into my driveway or unlocking my front door or walking into the kitchen where I poured 3 fingers of bourbon and drank it standing at the sink, staring out the window at Rebecca's rose garden. She'd planted those roses the first spring after her diagnosis. Said she wanted something beautiful to look at from the kitchen window. I'd kept them alive after she died, watered them, pruned them, talked to them sometimes in the quiet mornings when the house felt too empty to bear. They were the only thing I'd managed not to kill in the years since I lost her. Now I stared at them and thought about Graham Hoffman, a man I'd never met, whose wife I'd been sleeping with for 8 months, who was right now probably sitting at arrivals at Norfolk International, waiting for the woman he loved to pick him up. She was going to throw her arms around him and cry and tell him how much she'd missed him. And he had no idea. None at all. His entire life was a lie, and I was apparently the only person on earth who knew. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. My mind kept replaying the past 8 months, re-examining every conversation, every moment, every kiss, looking for the signs I should have seen. The way she always had an excuse for why I couldn't come to her place. The way she never introduced me to her friends. The way she'd sometimes go quiet in the middle of a conversation, like she was running calculations in her head. I'd thought she was mysterious, intriguing, a woman with depths waiting to be discovered. I was an idiot. Mostly I thought about Rebecca. The last year of her life had been a slow-motion nightmare. Pancreatic cancer doesn't leave much room for hope. 3% 5-year survival rate, the doctor had told us, and he'd said it with the careful gentleness of a man who delivered that news too many times. We'd tried everything. Chemo that made her so sick she couldn't keep water down. Experimental trials that gave us false hope and then snatched it away. Prayer, meditation, holistic remedies, a trip to some healer in Arizona that cost us $12,000 and 3 weeks of her rapidly shrinking time. In the end, I'd held her hand in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and dying flowers, and I'd watched the monitors flatline and I'd thought, this is what love looks like. This is what it costs. For 2 years after that, I'd been a zombie. Going through the motions at work. I'm a forensic accountant, which means I spend my days following money trails and finding the lies people hide in their tax returns. Coming home to an empty house, eating frozen dinners in front of the television. My friends tried to drag me out. My sister kept setting me up on dates I found excuses to cancel. Everyone said the same thing. Rebecca would have wanted you to move on. And finally, 8 months ago, I'd believed them. I'd gone to a fundraiser for the hospital where Rebecca died, because some part of me thought that was what moving on looked like, and I'd met Vanessa Palmer. She was beautiful and funny, and she laughed at my terrible jokes, and she made me feel, for the first time in years, like maybe I wasn't dead inside after all. Now I understood why she'd been at that fundraiser. It was a hunting ground, a place full of grieving, vulnerable people desperate for connection. Easy marks. I poured another bourbon, my third of the day, and it was only noon, and opened my laptop. Graham Hoffman. Military records are partially public. I found his service history, his decorations, his photograph in uniform. He looked exactly like the kind of man who would marry a woman like Vanessa, square-jawed, clear-eyed, the kind of face you'd put on a recruitment poster. His LinkedIn profile was more helpful. Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. 15 years of service. Currently stationed at Norfolk, which explained why Vanessa had been able to maintain the illusion. He was gone more than he was home. But it was his brother's website that gave me what I needed. Thomas Hoffman ran a carpentry business in Virginia Beach. Custom furniture, restoration work. His contact page listed an email address, and at the bottom, in small print, family-owned and operated since 2018. For general inquiries about Graham or military matters, please contact us and we'll forward your message. Asterisk. I stared at that email address for a long time. What was I supposed to do? Mind my own business? Walk away and let Graham Hoffman go on living his lie, blissfully unaware that his wife was living a double life? That felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate, but reaching out to him felt wrong too. Invasive, presumptuous, like I was appointing myself the arbiter of someone else's marriage. I thought about what Rebecca would have done. She'd always been the moral compass in our relationship, the one who knew the right thing to do even when the right thing was hard. She would have told Graham. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. And I thought about what I would have wanted. If Rebecca had been cheating on me, and she never would have, not in a million years, but if I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted someone to tell me the truth, even if the truth was a knife in the gut. I typed the email slowly, reading each sentence back to myself 3 times before moving to the next. Mr. Hoffman, I have information about your wife that you need to hear. This is not a scam. I am not trying to sell you anything or extract money from you. I understand how this sounds, and I know you have no reason to trust a stranger on the internet. But what I have to tell you is important, and I believe you deserve to know. Please call me at the number below. I can provide proof of everything I'm claiming. My name is Daniel Whitfield. I included my cell phone number. Then I sat there with my finger hovering over the send button, heart pounding, wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. I hit send. 3 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number with a Virginia area code. This is Daniel Whitfield. This is Graham Hoffman. The voice was flat, controlled, the kind of voice you develop when you spend your life giving orders in high-pressure situations. I got your email. I assume this is some kind of joke? It's not a joke. Then it's a scam. I don't know what you're trying to pull, but I've reported your email to... I dated your wife for 8 months, I said, cutting him off. Her name is Vanessa. She told me her last name was Palmer. She said she'd been divorced for 5 years. I found out the truth 3 days ago when I was helping her move a box, and I found your wedding album. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, slow and steady, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. She told me she visits her mother in Vermont every other weekend, I continued. Her mother died 4 years ago. She's been spending those weekends with me, in my bed, in my house. More silence. Then, very quietly, how do I know you're not making this up? You don't? That's why I'm offering to meet you. face to face. I'll show you the texts, the photos, whatever you need to see. What texts? 8 months of them. Good morning messages, plans for dates, photos she sent me, conversations about our future together. I paused, letting that sink in. She told me she was falling in love with me, Graham. Last month. She said I made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. I got home Saturday night, Graham finally said. His voice had changed. The control was cracking, like ice splintering under pressure. She picked me up at the airport. She was crying. She said she'd missed me every day I was gone. Saturday night, the same day I'd found the album, the same day I'd walked out of her apartment while she begged me to let her explain. She'd driven straight to the airport. She'd put on a performance. And Graham had believed every second of it. I'm sorry, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I came home early, Graham continued, like he hadn't heard me. She told me her mother's condition had gotten worse. Said she needed me. I put in for emergency leave and flew back 3 weeks ahead of schedule. His voice cracked slightly. I cut my deployment short because I thought my wife needed me. I closed my eyes. Her mother died 4 years ago. Yeah. His voice was barely a whisper now. You mentioned that. We agreed to meet. A diner off I-64, halfway between my place and his base. Neutral ground. He said he needed to see the proof with his own eyes before he could believe any of this. I understood. I wouldn't have believed it either, if I hadn't lived it. One more thing, I said before we hung up. Has she seemed different since you got back? Nervous? Distracted? A long pause. She's been attentive, very attentive, making my favorite meals, suggesting we watch our favorite movies. His laugh was hollow, bitter. I thought she was just glad to have me home. She's scared, I said. She thinks I might have told you something. She's making sure you don't have any reason to be suspicious. Then she doesn't know you contacted me? Not unless you told her. I haven't told her anything. I haven't been able to look at her since I got your email. His voice hardened. I'll see you Thursday. After we hung up, I sat in my empty living room and stared at the wall and wondered what the hell I'd just set in motion. Graham Hoffman was exactly what his photograph suggested. Tall, ramrod straight, with the kind of face that had probably never had trouble attracting women. But when he slid into the booth across from me at the Waffle House, I could see the cracks in the facade. Red-rimmed eyes, a jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Hands that wouldn't stay still, constantly moving, drumming on the table, adjusting his coffee cup, straightening the silverware. You're Daniel, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm Daniel. He studied me for a long moment. I let him look. I was 44, graying at the temples, carrying an extra 15 pounds I'd put on during my grief-eating years. Not the kind of man you'd expect to steal a lieutenant commander's wife. You don't look like what I expected, he finally said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone younger, flashier. He shook his head slowly. Someone who'd have a reason. There's never a reason. Not a good one anyway. A waitress came by, middle-aged, tired-looking, name tag reading Barb, and refilled Graham's coffee without asking. He waited until she was out of earshot before speaking again. Show me. I pulled out my phone, showed him the texts first. 8 months of conversations, intimate and casual and everything in between. Missing you today. Wish you were here. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. I know this is moving fast, but I've never felt this way about anyone. Then the photos. Vanessa and me at a restaurant, her head on my shoulder. Vanessa and me at a concert, holding hands. A selfie she'd sent me from what I now realized was his house, wearing his t-shirt, telling me she wished I was there with her. Graham's face didn't change as he scrolled through the evidence. He just kept looking, methodically, like he was reviewing an intelligence briefing. When he reached the end, he set my phone down on the table and stared at it for a long time. "That's the kitchen," he said quietly. "In that last picture. That's my kitchen. Those are my cabinets. That's my coffee maker on the counter." "I know. She sent you a photo from my house while I was overseas risking my life for—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I called her every night. Every single night I could get to a phone, no matter what time zone I was in. She would tell me about her day, about visiting her mother, about how much she missed me, how she was counting the days until I came home. I'm sorry. Stop saying that." There was a flash of anger in his voice, the first real emotion I'd heard from him. "You don't get to be sorry. You slept with my wife for 8 months. I didn't know she was your wife. I didn't know you existed. That doesn't—" He stopped, pressed his hands flat on the table like he was trying to keep himself grounded. Took a breath. "That doesn't make it better. But I know. I know you didn't know. That's the only reason I'm sitting here instead of—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Instead of what?" His jaw tightened. "I'm a naval officer, Daniel. I've been trained for combat, trained to handle threats. When I first read your email, my instinct was to find you and hurt you very badly." He met my eyes. "But then I realized something." "What?" "You're not the enemy. You're another victim. She did this to both of us." The waitress came back. We ordered food neither of us wanted. Scrambled eggs for me, pancakes for him. When she was gone again, Graham pulled out his own phone. "I need to show you something." He slid the phone across the table. On the screen was a photograph of a man I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, good-looking in a generic kind of way, wearing a polo shirt and standing next to a BMW. "Do you know him?" "Never seen him before. Should I?" His number was in Vanessa's phone. 3 months ago, I came home unexpectedly. My deployment schedule shifted, and she was in the shower. Her phone was on the nightstand, and it buzzed with a text. I didn't mean to look, but I saw the name. Someone called Kay. He paused. I asked her about it when she came out. She said he was a coworker, someone from the marketing firm where she works. Did you believe her? Why wouldn't I? She's my wife. We'd been married for 15 years. His voice was bitter now, self-directed. I told myself I was being paranoid, that all those months away were making me see things that weren't there. I even apologized to her for looking at her phone. So who is he? I don't know, but I tracked down his number, ran it through some contacts I have. Graham's expression hardened. Keith Lawson. He owns 3 car dealerships in the Tidewater area. He's 52 years old. He's married with 3 children. I stared at the photo. You think she's... I think you and I aren't the only ones, Daniel. I think this has been going on a lot longer than either of us knew. The food came. We pushed it around our plates without eating. Graham told me about his marriage. 15 years, no children by choice, what he'd thought was a solid foundation built on trust and shared goals. I told him about Rebecca, about my 2 years of grief, about meeting Vanessa at the hospital fundraiser. The hospital where your wife died, Graham said flatly. She picked you up at the hospital where your wife died from cancer. Yes. She targeted you. She knew exactly where to find someone vulnerable. I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. Of course he was right. What about Keith Lawson? I asked. You think he knows? I don't know what he knows, but I intend to find out. Graham pushed his untouched pancakes aside. I'm going to find out everything, Daniel. How long this has been going on. How many men there are. What she's been doing with her time, her money, her life that I supposedly shared with her. How? I'm a military intelligence officer. Gathering information is literally what I do. He met my eyes. But I could use help. From someone who knows how to follow money trails. You looked me up. Of course I looked you up. The minute I decided to meet you, I ran a full background check. Daniel Whitfield, forensic accountant. 14 years with a private firm specializing in fraud detection. You've testified as an expert witness in over 30 cases. You're good at what you do. I should have been offended. I wasn't. In his position, I would have done the same thing. What exactly are you proposing? Graham leaned forward. A partnership. I provide access to financial records, bank statements, anything I can legally get my hands on as her spouse. You use your skills to trace where the money's been going. Together, we find out the truth. And then what? Then we burn her life to the ground. Over the next 2 weeks, Graham and I became something I never expected. A team. We worked mostly at night, after Graham's duties were finished and while Vanessa thought he was doing paperwork in his home office. He scanned documents and emailed them to me. I ran them through the databases and analysis tools I used for my professional work. What I found made my stomach turn. Vanessa had a separate bank account under her maiden name, the one she'd used with me. The account held $47,000, accumulated over the past 3 years through deposits that didn't match any legitimate income source. $500 here, $1,200 there, $800 the next month. The pattern was irregular enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts, but consistent enough to suggest a system. She's been building a nest egg, I told Graham over the phone one evening. Money you didn't know about, in an account you didn't know existed. Can you trace where it's coming from? Working on it. I traced it. The deposits originated from a business account belonging to something called Lawson Automotive Group. A quick search revealed 3 car dealerships in the Tidewater area, all owned by a man named Keith Lawson, the same man whose photo Graham had shown me at the diner. Keith Lawson, I told Graham. He's been depositing money into your wife's secret account for 2 years. Small amounts, irregular intervals, like he's giving her an allowance. The silence on the line was deafening. Find out everything you can about him, Graham finally said, and set up a meeting. I want to look him in the eye. While I was digging into Keith Lawson, I stumbled onto something else. Something that made me question whether we were dealing with simple infidelity or something much, much worse. Vanessa's maiden name was Briggs, not Palmer. She'd lied about that too. And under the name Vanessa Briggs, I found a marriage record from 12 years ago. Her first husband was a man named Tyler Briggs. Tyler Briggs died in a single-car accident 11 years ago. Wet road, lost control, wrapped his car around a tree at 50 miles per hour. The police report ruled it an accident. The life insurance company paid out $300,000 to his widow. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I started looking for Tyler's family. His sister, Monica Briggs Cranston, still lived in the same town where Tyler had died. I found her through a memorial Facebook page for her brother. One of those digital graves people maintain for loved ones they've lost. The most recent post was from 6 months ago. Still miss you every day, little brother. The world is darker without you. I sent her a message. I said I was researching something connected to Tyler's death and asked if she'd be willing to speak with me. I expected her to ignore it. People don't usually respond to messages from strangers asking about dead relatives. Monica responded within the hour. I've been waiting 11 years for someone to ask me questions about Tyler. When can we meet? We met at a coffee shop near her home in rural Virginia. Monica was in her early 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of weathered face that suggested a hard life. She shook my hand firmly and got straight to business. You said you're researching something connected to Tyler. What kind of research? It's complicated. I'd thought about how much to tell her on the drive over. In the end, I decided to be honest. I was involved with a woman named Vanessa. I found out recently that she's not who she said she was. And when I started digging into her past, I found your brother. Monica's expression didn't change. You mean you found out she was married to him? Yes. And you found out he died? Yes. Did you find out how he died? Car accident, single vehicle, wet road, lost control and hit a tree. Monica leaned back in her chair. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee with a wooden stick, not looking at me. Tyler was the most careful driver I ever knew, she finally said. He used to lecture me about checking my mirrors. He'd get on my case if I went 5 miles over the speed limit. He once made me sit through a 30-minute video about defensive driving because I changed lanes without signaling. She almost smiled at the memory, but it faded quickly. The idea that he just lost control? Went off the road for no reason? I never bought it. Not for 1 second. What do you think happened? I don't know what happened, but I know what happened before. She looked at me then, and her eyes were hard. She left him 3 months before he died. Just walked out one day, said she needed space, moved in with a friend somewhere across town. Tyler was devastated. He loved her more than anything on this earth. He would have done anything for her, given her anything, forgiven her anything. And then she came back. 2 weeks before the accident, showed up on his doorstep with tears in her eyes, said she'd made a terrible mistake, said she wanted to work things out. Tyler was over the moon. Called me that same night, couldn't stop talking about how they were going to have a fresh start, how everything was going to be different this time. Monica's voice was flat now, emotionless, but I could hear the anger underneath. 2 weeks later, he was dead, and she got everything. The house, the savings, the car he'd just paid off, and $300,000 in life insurance. I let that sink in. You think she? I don't know what I think. There was never any evidence. The police said it was an accident. The insurance company investigated. They always investigate when the payout is that big. And they decided to pay out. Everyone told me I was crazy, that I was looking for someone to blame because I couldn't accept that my brother was just gone. She leaned forward. But I knew Vanessa. I watched her at the funeral. She was crying, sure, making all the right sounds. But I saw her when she thought no one was looking. I saw how she looked at the house, at the check from the insurance company, like she was calculating. Did you tell the police that? I told everyone who would listen. The cops said grief makes people paranoid. The insurance investigator said there was no evidence of foul play. Tyler's friend said I was being cruel to Vanessa when she needed support. Monica's smile was bitter. So I let go. What choice did I have? 11 years. 11 years of knowing in my gut that something was wrong and not being able to prove a damn thing. She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Why are you here, Daniel? What are you really looking for? I told her. Everything. The affair, the discovery, the meeting with Graham, the money trail, Keith Lawson. By the time I finished, her face had gone pale as paper. Dear God, she whispered. She's been doing this the whole time, ever since Tyler, maybe even before. It looks that way. And Graham, her husband now, he doesn't know. He knows now. We're working together. Monica was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it held answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I kept everything, she said. Every document, every photo, every piece of paper from Tyler's estate. I kept the police report, the insurance investigation file, everything. I always thought someday someone would come asking questions. Someday someone would want to know the truth. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. This is the insurance investigator who handled Tyler's case. He's retired now, but we've stayed in touch. He told me once off the record that the case never sat right with him either. I looked at the name on her screen. Would he talk to me? I think he'd love to. Keith Lawson agreed to meet Graham at his dealership. He didn't know who Graham was, just that someone wanted to discuss a personal matter and was willing to come to him. Graham figured the element of surprise would work in his favor. I wasn't there for the confrontation, but Graham called me afterward, his voice hollow and strange. He thought she was a widow, Graham said. She told him I died overseas, military service, killed in action. She even showed him photos from my memorial service. Except it wasn't my memorial service. It was someone else's. Someone she found online. Did he know she was married to you? He's married himself. 3 kids. Oldest one just started college. Graham laughed, but it was a dark, wounded sound. He thought he was having an affair with a lonely widow. He's been giving her money for 2 years because he thought he was helping a grieving woman get back on her feet. Helping her pay bills while she dealt with her loss. How much? Over $50,000 total. Small amounts like you said. Easy to hide from his wife. He said Vanessa told him she didn't want him to feel obligated, that she just needed a little help until she got her life together. Made him feel like a hero. I closed my eyes. There's more, isn't there? Yeah. Graham's voice went even flatter. 6 months ago, Vanessa told him she was pregnant, with his child. The words hit me like a physical blow. Was she? No, I checked. No medical records anywhere. No prenatal appointments, no blood work, nothing. She made the whole thing up. What did she tell him happened? Miscarriage. A month after she told him about the pregnancy, he gave her $15,000 for medical expenses, for therapy, for a memorial service for the baby that never existed. Graham's voice cracked. He was crying when he told me. This 52-year-old man who owns 3 car dealerships, crying in his office because a woman convinced him he'd lost a child. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. She's a monster, Graham continued, almost to himself. I've been married to her for 15 years and I never knew. I never even suspected. None of us did. Keith wants to help. He wants to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. He's willing to provide financial records, testimony, whatever we need. And his wife? He's going to tell her, after we're finished. He said he owes her that much at least. That night, Graham and I had a long conversation about what we'd discovered. The picture was horrifying. A woman who had been running the same playbook for over a decade. Find vulnerable men, grieving widowers, lonely travelers, men with money and emotional needs. Build relationships, extract resources, move on to the next target. And in at least one case, a husband who had died conveniently, leaving her with a substantial payout. We can't prove she killed Tyler, Graham said. There's no evidence. It's been 11 years. Whatever might have been there is long gone. I know. But that doesn't mean we can't make sure she never does this again. We made a plan. Graham would file for divorce, citing infidelity with documentation. I would provide a sworn statement about our relationship. Keith Lawson, after some convincing, agreed to provide financial records showing the money he'd given her. Monica Briggs Cranston would be ready to go public with her suspicions if Vanessa tried to play the victim. But we needed one more thing. An admission from Vanessa herself. Something in her own words that showed who she really was. She thinks she's still in control, I said. She doesn't know you know. She doesn't know we've met. Right now, we have the only advantage we're ever going to get. Graham was silent for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I go back to her. I tell her I overreacted, that I've had time to think, that I understand why she didn't tell me about her marriage. I could feel my stomach churning even as I said the words. She'll take me back. She needs me. I'm her exit strategy. And if I can get her talking, you want to record her. My state is one-party consent. I can record any conversation I'm part of without telling her. It's legal. The silence stretched on so long I thought he'd refuse. Do it, Graham finally said. Get her on tape, and then we end this. It's hard to explain what it felt like to text Vanessa again. My fingers felt numb on the phone screen, and I had to delete and retype the message 3 times before I got it right. Hey, I've been thinking about everything. I know I overreacted. Can we talk? She responded in under 5 minutes. I've missed you so much. I'm so sorry for everything. When can I see you? I stared at those words and felt nothing but ice in my veins. 8 months of what I'd thought was love, and all of it had been a performance. Every kiss, every conversation, every moment of connection, manufactured by a woman who saw me as a mark, not a person. We met for dinner at a restaurant we'd been to before, a little Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. Romantic. Intimate. The kind of place where lovers reconcile. Vanessa looked beautiful, of course. She always looked beautiful. She cried when she saw me, reached for my hands across the table, apologized for the 100th time, said Graham was a mistake she'd made young, and that she'd been trying to find the courage to leave for years. I nodded in all the right places, asked careful questions, made mental notes of every lie that came out of her mouth. He's never home, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. He's always deployed, always gone. I spent years alone in that house, waiting for a man who chose the Navy over me. Over us. That must have been hard. It was. It is. She squeezed my hand. But then I met you. And for the first time in so long, I felt like someone actually saw me. Actually cared about me as a person, not just as a wife waiting at home. I managed to smile. I felt the same way. I know I should have told you sooner. About Graham. About everything. I was just so scared of losing you. Her eyes welled up again. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, Daniel. Maybe ever. Over dessert, she leaned forward with an expression of barely contained excitement. I'm finally going to do it, she said. I'm going to file for divorce. Really? I've been putting money aside, enough to start fresh somewhere, a new life, a new beginning. She smiled at me, and there was genuine warmth in it. The warmth of a woman who thought she was about to close a deal. With you, Daniel. I want to build that new life with you. I realized then, with perfect clarity, what I was to her. Not a lover, not a partner, an exit strategy. She was going to leave Graham, take whatever assets she could claim, and make me her next primary source of stability while she worked on the next mark. That sounds wonderful, I said. I'd like that. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I invited Vanessa to my house the following week for what she thought was a romantic dinner. I cooked her favorite meal, salmon with a lemon butter sauce, and opened a bottle of expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. The recorder was in my jacket pocket. Small, digital, with a 40-hour battery life. I'd tested it 3 times to make sure the audio was clear. We ate. We drank. I asked her questions about her past, her hopes for the future, her dreams for the life we were supposedly going to build together. She answered eagerly, clearly believing she was building intimacy with the man she was planning to make her next financial anchor. Then I steered the conversation toward Rebecca. I think about her a lot, I said, staring into my wine glass. How much I loved her. How I couldn't have imagined betraying her, ever. Not for any reason. Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's because you're a good man, Daniel. A better man than most. Rebecca was lucky to have you. I keep wondering, would she be disappointed in me for moving on, for being with someone new? She would want you to be happy, Vanessa said firmly. That's what people who love us want. They want us to live, to find joy again. I nodded slowly. What about you? With Graham, I mean. Didn't you ever feel guilty? She laughed softly, a rueful sound. Graham and I were over years ago. We just exist in the same space now, going through the motions. He's gone all the time anyway. It's like being married to a ghost. Have you thought about just leaving? Before now, I mean? And give up the benefits? She smiled like we were sharing a private joke. The military pays for everything: housing, healthcare, insurance. I'd be an idiot to leave before I had something better lined up. She squeezed my hand again. Before I had you. I nodded. Let the silence stretch. Then, as casually as I could manage, what about before Graham? You were married before, right? What was his name? Tyler? The change in her face was subtle. If I hadn't been watching for it, I might have missed it. A brief flicker of something cold and calculating behind her eyes before she smoothed it over with practiced ease. Tyler was complicated, she said slowly. We weren't good together. Young and foolish, you know how it is. I was going to leave him, had actually moved out, but then… She shrugged elegantly. The universe solved the problem for me. The ice in my chest spread to my fingertips. The universe? Vanessa smiled. It was the same warm, beautiful smile I'd fallen for 8 months ago, but now I could see what was behind it. The calculation. The emptiness. Some things just work out. I managed to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was screaming. The universe solved the problem. As if a human being's death was just a convenient solution to a scheduling conflict. That must have been hard, I made myself say, losing someone like that. It was difficult at first, but I got through it. I'm resilient that way. She sipped her wine. And the insurance money helped. Let me start over fresh. Find Graham. She looked at me with something that might have been tenderness. Find my way to you, eventually. I excused myself to use the bathroom. I stood at the sink, gripping the porcelain, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. I had what I needed. Her voice on tape, talking about her dead husband's death like it was a stroke of luck. Her casual admission that she was staying with Graham for the benefits. Her plans to take his money and move on to her next mark. It wasn't a confession of murder. It never would be. But it was enough to show the world, and the courts, who she really was. The next morning, Graham served Vanessa with divorce papers at their home. I wasn't there for the confrontation. Graham insisted on doing it alone. But he called me afterward and described the whole thing in detail. His voice was strange, almost attached, like he was narrating someone else's life. She was making breakfast when I came down, he said. Humming. Making my favorite, Eggs Benedict. She smiled when she saw me. Asked if I'd slept well. What did you say? Nothing. I just put the papers on the counter next to her and watched her face change. How did she react? Shock, then anger, then tears. He laughed bitterly. She went through all the stages in about 30 seconds. Asked me what this was, what she'd done, why I was doing this to her, to us. Did you tell her? I showed her. Everything. The bank accounts, the phone records, the timeline of her lies. He paused. She tried to spin it. Said I'd driven her to it with my absences. Said she was lonely, made mistakes. But she still loved me. Still wanted to make it work. Did she mention Keith? Not until I showed her his photo. Graham's voice hardened. I asked if she knew him. She went white. Said he was just a friend, someone from work. Then I told her what Keith had told me, about the widow story, about the pregnancy, about the money, and she just stopped talking. That's when you showed her my photo? Yeah. He took a breath. The look on her face, Daniel, when she realized you were involved. When she understood that everything had been falling apart around her while she thought she was still in control. Another pause. I've never seen pure hatred before. Not like that. Not even in combat. What happened then? The doorbell rang. Keith was right on time. I could picture the scene. Keith Lawson walking into the house he'd never seen before, seeing the woman he'd believed was a grieving widow standing in her kitchen next to the husband she'd told him was dead. He told her she was sick, Graham continued. That's what he said. Just stood there in my kitchen and told her she needed help. Professional help. That what she'd done wasn't normal, wasn't human. And Vanessa? She tried one more play. The tears came back. She said she was scared, that she didn't know how to get out, that she'd felt trapped for years. She actually used that word, trapped, like she was the victim. That's when you played the recording? That's when I played the recording. I could imagine her face when she heard her own voice, casual and cold, floating through the room. The universe solved the problem for me. What did she do? Nothing. She just stood there. And for the first time since I've known her, 15 years of marriage, Daniel, I saw her without a mask, without a performance. Just nothing. Empty. What happens now? Now my lawyer earns his fee, and then we make sure the world knows exactly who Vanessa Hoffman really is. The divorce proceedings were brutal, but brief. Vanessa hired an expensive attorney and tried to fight for assets. She claimed emotional distress, abandonment, a pattern of neglect on Graham's part that had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. It was a standard defense for infidelity cases: throw enough mud and hope some of it sticks. But Graham's attorney presented the evidence we'd gathered: the hidden bank accounts, the money from Keith, the systematic deception over years, the sworn statements from me and Keith, the timeline showing how she'd maintained multiple relationships simultaneously, lying to each man about the others. Under the state's divorce laws, infidelity and financial deception can influence how assets are divided. Vanessa's position crumbled like wet paper. She ended up with minimal assets: her personal belongings, a small portion of savings, nothing more. No alimony, no claim on Graham's pension. The judge's decision was withering. The evidence presented suggests a pattern of deliberate deception and financial manipulation that this court cannot reward. But that wasn't the end. Monica Briggs Cranston took the recording to a journalist friend who covered cold cases for a regional news outlet. The story ran 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Questions resurface around 11-year-old fatal accident after new recording emerges. The article was careful. Lawyers had scrubbed it for libel, but it laid out the timeline in damning detail. The first marriage. The separation 3 months before Tyler's death. The reconciliation 2 weeks before the accident. The life insurance payout. The quote about the universe solving her problem. The suggestion that perhaps Tyler Briggs's death deserved another look. The police opened a preliminary inquiry. They didn't have enough to charge Vanessa with anything. The evidence was too old, too circumstantial. But her name was now publicly associated with suspicion. Search engines indexed the article. Comment sections filled with speculation. Her carefully constructed life collapsed in stages. Keith's wife found the article while researching the woman her husband had confessed to having an affair with. Their divorce was finalized 2 months later, uglier than Graham's, with custody battles and accusations and lawyers bleeding both parties dry. Keith lost a significant portion of his business in the settlement. He gave interviews to anyone who would listen, warning other men about women who seemed too good to be true. Other people started coming forward. A man from North Carolina who dated Vanessa briefly 5 years ago. She disappeared suddenly after he'd lent her money for a family emergency. A woman in Georgia whose ex-husband had been involved with Vanessa and had ended up with mysterious credit card charges after they broke up. A pattern emerged that even Vanessa's defenders couldn't explain away. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter. Handwritten, postmarked from Arizona, from a man named Russell Castillo. He'd seen the news coverage. One of the journalists had picked up the story and expanded it, building a timeline of Vanessa's behavior over the past 15 years. Russell's letter was 3 pages long. Mr. Whitfield, I saw your name in the article about Vanessa. I wanted to write and thank you. I was engaged to her 12 years ago. Before Tyler, before Graham. We met in college. She was beautiful and smart, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. We were engaged for 6 months. I gave her a ring that had belonged to my grandmother. Then one day she was just gone. Left a note saying she needed to find herself. Took the ring with her. I never saw her again. I spent years wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, why I wasn't enough. Now I know it was never about me. She was just getting started, testing her methods, figuring out how to use people. I got lucky, Mr. Whitfield. She left because I didn't have enough money to be worth her time. I was a broke college kid with nothing to offer but love. That wasn't what she was looking for. Thank you for exposing her. Because of you, maybe she can't do this to anyone else. Sincerely, Russell Castillo. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where I kept Rebecca's things. Graham reached out a few months later. He'd requested a transfer to a new base. Fresh start, new location, nobody who knew him asking awkward questions about his ex-wife. He'd started therapy, which he said was helping more than he'd expected. I keep having this dream, he told me over the phone. We're back on our wedding day, cutting the cake. And in the dream, I can see her clearly, the way she looked at me. And I finally understand what I was seeing. Not love, just calculation. Like I was a resource to be managed. Does that make it easier? I don't know. Maybe. At least I'm not wondering anymore. At least I know it was never about me. Keith reached out too, eventually. His divorce had cost him dearly. Not just money, but his relationship with his kids, his standing in the community, his sense of himself as a decent person. But there was something almost like relief in his voice when we talked. I was living a lie too, he said. Not just with her, with everyone. My wife deserved better. My kids deserved better. At least now I can try to make things right. As for Vanessa, she disappeared, scrubbed her social media, moved somewhere none of us could track. Monica hired a private investigator to try to find her, hoping the publicity might pressure the police to take a harder look at Tyler's case. But the trail went cold somewhere in Nevada. I don't know where she is now. I don't want to know. But sometimes I wonder if she's out there somewhere, starting over with a new name and a new story and a new target. If she's sitting across from some grieving widower at a fundraiser, touching his hand, telling him she understands his pain. I hope not. I hope the publicity made her toxic enough that no one falls for it again. But I know better than to count on hope. A year after everything happened, I went back to the fundraiser. Same hospital, same ballroom, same cause. I wasn't there looking for anyone. I was there because Rebecca had cared about cancer research more than almost anything else, and supporting the place that had tried to save her felt like a way to honor that. I stood near the bar with a club soda, watching people mingle, when a woman approached me. Mid-30s, dark hair, warm smile. "You look like you're a million miles away," she said. Something like that. I took a sip of my drink. Just thinking. About anything in particular? Someone I lost, a while ago. She nodded, and there was understanding in her expression, not pity, just recognition. I lost my mom 2 years ago, breast cancer. That's why I come to these things. I'm sorry. Thank you. She held out her hand. I'm Lynn. Daniel. We talked for a while, about her mother, about Rebecca, about the strange way grief becomes part of you over time. Not fading, just changing shape. She was easy to talk to, funny, direct. The kind of person who asked questions because she actually wanted to hear the answers. When the event ended, she gave me her business card. In case you ever want to grab coffee, no pressure. I looked at the card, looked at her, thought about everything that had happened. I'd like that, I said. But I should tell you something first. What's that? The last year of my life has been complicated. I'm not ready to jump into anything. I need to take things slow. Lynn smiled. Slow sounds good to me. I put her card in my wallet. We shook hands, and I walked out into the night. The future wasn't something to be afraid of anymore. It was just something to be lived. Carefully, honestly, one day at a time.